Good morning, everyone. This is Diane Murray at Southern Art Gallery. Today we are going to be talking about values and how to punch those values in your paintings for more drama and more interest. So what I have here are two little paintings that I did the other day. This one in watercolor, this one in oil. I brought this one to a more finished level. This was a preliminary painting for this. And when I look at these paintings and I look at the original photograph, this photograph, and I look at and I try to ascertain the different values that are in the photograph, I always do a black and white of the photograph. All I do is go in and change the photo to black and white, which I'm sure you're able to do on your phone these days. And it shows me a more clear, distinct value pattern of where the darkest darks and the lightest lights are. So then I will go in if I want to push the values to an extreme, see what that would be like before I ever do the painting. This is a little app called Notinizer. See if I can find it on my phone for you here. Right there, it's called Notinizer. It allows you to pick a photograph so that you can really push the values and decide how dark you want your darks to be. You don't always have to be a slave to the photograph. You can always make the decision to go lighter or darker. If I were to take this painting and I was trying to decide how much I want to push the values on this, I could go into and this is an iPad, I could go into the different settings and I could look and see if I want to push it warmer, cooler, more dramatic. And I always go, it's my personality, but I always tend to go for the more dramatic. But I can just get an idea of how I can make this painting better. If I go on down and do a dramatic warm, that's more interesting. And you see it pushes the values darker. You can see how much darker the values would be in this painting if I chose to use this setting. There's a dramatic cool if I want it to look like that, to have much more of a blue influence, which I think is also nice. And then here's the mono that shows me where the darks, and what this shows me is that my darks are not nearly dark enough. And it's often the case with my students and with myself that I don't tend to push the darks as dark as they need to be. I think there's a lot of different reasons for that. I think one reason for that is because we generally in watercolor, we paint from light to dark. So we tend to put the darks in at the very end. And I think we get to the point where we're happy with the painting and we're afraid that if we go any further, that we're going to mess the painting up. So oftentimes I will put my darkest darks in first, which is contrary to most watercolor teaching, but it's a common practice with oils. And if you do this, then you're able to get those darks in right away and then not worry about messing up your painting later. So that's a little tip for you. So if I were going to go back and work on this particular painting and push these darks darker, I thought we would go ahead and do that today and see how it turns out. So if I didn't want to just use this setting, I could go in here and actually go into exposure and change the exposure. Or I could go into brilliance, make it darker that way, or lighter. So these are all ways that you can learn to correct your paintings. Now with highlights, with shadows, you can always go darker. So see, I think that looks better. And so this is generally what I do. There's contrast. There it is with this is a good example. Now this is a this is how this painting would be if it had very little value contrast. And when we talk about contrast, it's often talking about value. So if I pushed the values darker, you can see how much more exciting that painting would be. So a lot of times I will play with the contrast. And in my workshops, I teach my students how to actually play with these functions on their phones. Now here's a good one. This is warmth. So if I want it cooler or if I want it warmer, I can decide that. If I'm happy, and I am with that, so I will go in and save that. So now, if you can see the difference here, let me make sure you guys are seeing this. Okay, so you can see the difference between what I want my painting to look like and what the painting actually looks like. So this is the easiest way to correct a value problem in your paintings, is to just take a photograph of it and play around with it on your phone and decide how you want to correct it before you ever touch the painting itself. So with that in mind, we will go ahead and remove this one. So the first thing we do, of course, is to figure out our color mixes. And you can see here that we've got a much darker darkness in the water. I usually start with my backgrounds because that's just how I do it. And I think to make this all softer, we'll just go ahead and wet this. Anytime you want a soft transition, it's better to wet your paper first. And this, you know, I'm not wedded to this painting. This was just a little exercise. So if it gets messed up, it's not a big problem for me. I would suggest that when you're practicing doing this, you take a painting that you're not thrilled with and that you try this technique with it, just push in your values, and it will make your future paintings better and not ruin a perfectly good painting. So we're going to start with the darks first. And we're really going to push them in here. Really get a definition in here, and here, and some of these that are coming out here. This whole area. And this is just the same mixture that I had mixed up for this painting, primarily indigo. Okay, I'm liking that better. And really, that's all I would do with that background, unless it's not dark enough when it dries. And if it's not, we'll go back in and do it again. Now, if I want softness in these, let's change to a smaller brush. If I want softness in these feathers, then I would pre-wet this as well, just so that it stays soft. And then I would get my darks. And this is just a dark brown mixture that I have mixed up on my palette. And just touch in some darks. I've been watching the Chinese portrait painters lately, and I am absolutely fascinated with how they just dab color, and it looks so beautiful. So we're just going for a little definition here, a little bit more than we had before, to mimic the look of feathers. don't want that too dark there. All right. I do want definition here, but actually I want that more blue. There's a lot of blue in the in seagulls, believe it or not. It's a kind of a blue-gray. But I think I like some of that. There, just make it a little more colorful. And if it's too much, just dab it out. And while we've got it, let's add some blues down in here as well. Remember, we're simulating feathers, so we want it to be really soft. And we know that underneath the feathers, it's going to be darker, of course. Like that better. And there's a lot of darkness in here and down in here. We may as well get a little more definition while we're doing the darks. And if you have an area like this that you want to just have overall darkness, just fade it out and let it stay darker toward the edge. And if you want really loose strokes, just hold your brush way back. Sometimes it's better to not have control than it is to have control. So this is what I would do. I would just keep building up the color until I was happy with how dark everything was. Just keep it all soft. I actually want these feathers to come out a little bit longer. So I think I kind of shorted them a little bit there. Add a little blue to that. And if you get too many distinct lines in there that you're not happy with, you can always just blot them out a little bit. There. Even that looks better to me. I would probably keep fiddling with this, but this gives you an idea. All right, and then I think I would push this a little darker here. And there you go. And I am happy with that. I think that's much better. So we will call that done. And I hope you found this helpful.